Hi, folks. I'm Brandon from Twister Talk. We're re-airing classic shows for you to enjoy. So, settle in and have fun. As always, thanks for listening. All right, on with the show.
It's a twister! It's a twister! Back up! Back up! Back up!
Here is Twister Talk Storm Chasing Tip 2839. If you see a reflection in the funnel, you are too close. And of course, that's our Twister Talk safety message from us at Twister Talk about looking at tornadoes. And if you can't see a reflection, well, actually, it's too late.
I'm still confused that tornadoes are reflective.
Well, you know, those guys that kind of believe anything we tell them sometimes.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
maybe if we ask them to send us like $50,000, that might work?
Yeah, and we'll give them the key of where to stop. Remember, tornadoes also stop at red lights.
Oh, there you go.
Brandon talked about that one time in one of the movies, and it stopped at a red light.
That's
And
right.
I got pulled over for speeding.
I can't remember what movie that was, Brandon,
Night
but
of
I
the
do remember that.
Yeah, Night of the Twister.
Night of the Twister. Boy, that's such a classic.
Well, I suppose a tornado could be reflective if it hit a mirror factory.
That's true. But, you know, some people, you know, do you know that if you hit that F5 there, that'll take you to Oz? It will, yeah. No,
just coming out of nowhere, wouldn't it be kind of cool if a tornado hit a glitter factory?
Yeah,
that would be the coolest tornado ever.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
It really
and speaking of not bad ideas, it's Twister Talk. I'm Gary.
I'm Sue.
And I'm Brandon.
That's right. We're all here again to talk to you about tornadoes and severe weather.
That's right.
Actually, though, today we're going to talk about ham radios. You're probably going, ham radios?
Ham radio?
You got to be kidding me. But I'm going to tell you, folks, ham radio plays a significant role in severe weather. And we'll talk about that and find out why the National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center values ham radio work.
Even now.
It's incredible. And I love it. I love it. It's great. And Brandon's going to be talking about some of that because digging in details, and he's also interested in ham radio. So, well, we all are, actually. I mean, I love the idea of doing that. And we'll talk about somebody who did save lives during this show. But right now, you know what, Brandon? Yeah, you got it, man. It's terminology time. So we're bringing Brandon in. He's going to do his terminology for today. And Brandon, what terminology do you have to share with the audience today? We're sitting on the edge of the seats waiting.
Well, that's very good then, because I do have something interesting for you today.
All right.
Today, we are defining air mass thunderstorm.
Okay.
Generally speaking, this is a thunderstorm that's not associated with a front or any other type of what we refer to as synoptic scale forcing mechanism. So not a front or any other type of high or low or type of system that might disturb the atmosphere, such as to force thunderstorm development.
Right.
Air mass thunderstorms typically are associated with those warm, humid summer afternoons. They develop during the afternoon in response to solar heating, and they tend to dissipate fairly quickly after sunset. They are generally less likely to be severe than other types of thunderstorms,
Right.
i.e. supercells and squall lines and so forth. But they are still capable of producing downbursts, brief heavy rainfalls, and in extreme cases, they can even produce hail up to 3/4 of an inch in diameter or more.
Right. And they have winds about, like I said, downburst winds could be anywhere from 60 to 70 miles an hour. Not all that common, but does happen. But yeah, a lot of times torrential rain. You can pick up one of those storms can drop about an inch or two of rain just a matter of a half hour, 45 minutes.
And it is also interesting to note that there is the argument here that that states that since all thunderstorms do tend to be associated with some type of forcing mechanism, whether it's what we call synoptic scale or otherwise, that the existence of a true air mass thunderstorm could be debated.
Well, yeah, I mean, I read some posts on that over the years. I just look at a storm, it's a hot, humid day. Cumulus clouds show up. One of them starts getting bigger than the others, and it fills up, and the next thing you know, you got a thunderstorm.
Yeah, we had some of those yesterday
Right.
in the general area. Not here in Columbus, but I believe south of here they had some
Right.
storms like that actually produced quite a bit of rain.
And, that happens a lot. And also, Brandon, when you read some of that stuff, you see a lot of storms, sometimes they pop up, rain themselves out, and they're gone.
Yeah.
Now, some last a little longer, but they've been known to just like half an hour of rain, and that's it. They dissipate. So, but yeah, there's a big difference in air mass thunderstorms from others. And I know, like you said, some have been debating all that, but usually if it's a hot, humid day and you see big cumulus clouds, it's going to be a thunderstorm somewhere, and usually they're not severe.
I guess you could say that air mass thunderstorms bring balance to the force.
Yes, they do. Balance to the force.
Yeah. That's not
yes,
good.
they do.
That's right. And Obi-Wan will never forget that. Got struck by lightning once.
Yeah. Ooh,
that's why we have Jar Jar Binks. But anyway.
God.
Anyway, so there we go. You've been terminologized today, folks, and that's it. But I will tell you one thing. And we're going to let Brandon take the lead on this and talk a little bit about. But people, sometimes we talk about cell phones, satellites, this, that, and the other, and we kind of forget about the quote older technology. Oh, that's just then. But I'm telling you, older technology that stood the test of time, advising weather people, is ham radio. And Brandon, I want you to take a little bit of a minute to talk about this, because believe it or not, even Wilmington and all the major reporting weather stations all still use ham radio during severe weather and other times. So go right ahead. The floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you very much. And yes, as Gary mentioned, we're going to take a little look at amateur radio today, also referred to as ham radio. It's basically it's like a civil service, or like what you might call a civil radio service.
Mm-hmm.
Amateur radio is regulated by the FCC, so there is a specific bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum that is allocated for amateur radio use, and in order to legally broadcast over ham radio frequencies, you do have to go and get your ham license.
Okay.
And you can go to the American Radio Relay League's website and get information on that if you want to kind of learn a little bit more about the detailed history of ham radio, look at some of the programs they have, and also locate classes and even testing sites, and even get a hold of test and study materials to help you prepare for the license test.
What does that entail, Brandon? Let's say you decide you want to get interested in ham radio or amateur radio, what does that entail as far as studying and classing and even purchasing the right equipment?
Well, as far as getting your license, there is a test that you have to pass. The test generally is going to be a 50-question multiple choice. Those questions will be drawn from a question pool, which is generally comprised of a little over 400 different questions. And you can, if you want to go the full bore study route, you can go to booksellers like Books A Million or Amazon.com, and you can order a test prep book for a ham radio depending on the class of license you want to get. People pretty much usually start with what's called the technician class, so you can get a book that will walk you through. It's just like a textbook.
Okay.
It'll walk you through all of the basics of ham radio, how radio frequency works, how the equipment works. It will begin to acquaint you with the FCC regulations, as well as some of the etiquette that's involved in ham radio. And it'll also begin to review the types of equipment that you can purchase and use.
Okay. How much does a license cost? If I wanted to get a license to have an amateur radio setup, how much does that cost?
Generally, the license is, when I went to, now, just a quick thing to point out here, as we are discussing ham radio, I do actually have my technician license.
Okay.
And when I went to do that, it was, I believe it was $35.
Okay.
To take the test.
All right.
And now there is, ham radio licenses used to be free, and they used to kind of last in perpetuity, so to speak.
Right.
Some years ago, when the licensing process was revamped. They did make some changes there to where now if you're inactive for a certain period of time, then your license may expire and you would have to renew it before you can actually begin legally, transmitting over designated ham frequencies.
Okay. And so basically, once you have your license, now are there different grades of licenses? In other words, like in radio, you used to have the third class license, which would let you take transmitter readings and work in the air studio. There was a second class license that would let you do basic transmitter maintenance and check things. And there was a first class license that's basically, if you're chief engineer of a radio station, you had to have that to do that. So is the same thing in amateur radio?
Yes, it is actually.
Okay.
And there were some changes right around the turn of the century here.
Okay.
So prior to 2000, there were 5 classes of amateur radio license. In ascending order, they were novice, technician, general, advanced, and amateur extra. And up until 1991, each one of those classes of license required you to have some proficiency in Morse code.
Okay.
So that was part of the process of getting your license, was not only doing the test prep and studying, but also learning Morse code.
Right.
Now, there was a minor change to that in 1991. There was a major revamp done in 2000. Right at the turn of the millennium, the entire process, the entire licensing structure was streamlined. Post 2000, there are now 3 classes of amateur radio license, which are technician, general, and extra. Last I heard, the only one of those that now requires any Morse code proficiency is the extra class.
Okay.
And that requires really only basic proficiency. And my take on this is that was probably done as a result of the advent of the internet, the rise of cell phones.
Right.
People were probably beginning to drift away from amateur radio, and certainly newer generations who were getting into it would not have been exposed to things like Morse code, and were probably not interested in being required to learn it as a part of getting into the hobby.
Yeah, it takes a long time to be proficient.
Yeah, it does take a while. Now, Brandon, how does the National Weather Service, especially the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, they have a huge amateur radio net that they maintain and monitor during severe weather, and is also part of the Skywarn program. And every local office has a setup where you have a gentleman or someone or several someones who will watch that during severe weather. Brandon, is there any information that you can share about? I think you can contact your local office if you're interested, and they'll give you the information. Yes,
you certainly can get a hold of your local National Weather Service office. And Gary, of course, you and I have both taken Skywarn training. So we've been part of that process. But the National Weather Service office in Norman does use amateur radio as one method of communicating with spotter groups and emergency management organizations, really throughout the entire country. Prior to the rise of smartphones and social media and widespread broadband internet, amateur radio operators were really one of the critical components of maintaining that communication network, to bring that information in, get ground truth, and then disseminate it to any points that might need it. And of course, they're still important.
Just to talk about someone back in the day, I think you've heard us in the past, we talked about the 1985 May 31st tornado outbreak in eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania, which was horrific. One of the worst outbreaks in that part of the country ever. Well, there was a gentleman who he'd been in Vietnam. He was injured in Vietnam. He was confined to a wheelchair. His name was Richard Bombay. Richard Bombay was he held one of the high-tech licenses at that time for amateur radio. And he had a huge tower in his backyard, and he had a generator and everything in his home. And so he put a pretty expensive video camera on top of the tower, and he actually was able to span the horizon 180 degrees. So Richard saw the anvils, he saw the thunderstorms, he saw wall clouds, that whole storm system moving through, and he was able to do real-time warnings and real-time reports to the weather service office in Cleveland, Erie, Pennsylvania, and Pittsburgh. And Bombay is credited with saving many lives because it was his ground truth and his only at that time that got the warnings out, because there were, back then, landlines, some of those were down, and there were other issues. So he actually he was actually awarded a congressional medal about 2 years later for his work there, because it really was yeoman's work. And the state of Ohio also honored him, along with Pennsylvania, with a special citation. And he saved a lot of lives because basically the Youngstown office had gone down and Erie was having intermittent issues with power, and so it was Bombay's relaying information to these groups, and then in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, then they could funnel it down and get it out. So that was that's why amateur radio, or ham radio, is very important even today. We forget sometimes that amateur radio was actually important during the super outbreak in 1974.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's very hard to knock out.
Well, and James Spahn, I don't know if you ever read that. He wrote an article about that. He was volunteering one of the ham radio operations.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
And so he was relaying messages all over the state
about
the awful outbreak in Alabama that night. In fact, it was his work and the people that worked with him. They're the first ones that heard about Greene, Alabama being wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And so
that's pretty amazing. The thing about ham radio is it's much more ubiquitous than people think.
Oh, it is, and Brandon makes some good points about that. It really, it can be a lifesaver, and it is the infrastructure is independent of cell towers and high-speed internet and everything else, and the what you can broadcast through that antenna, single antenna is going to be more likely to be heard by somebody who can take immediate action with it, and that happened during the 85 outbreak in Eastern Ohio, and of course the super outbreak in 74. Ham radio was very, very necessary to letting people know. They're the ones that let Louisville know that Brandenburg had been hit and that storm was heading toward Louisville. So they're the ones that let them know in advance, like, hey, it's headed your way, be ready.
If you are looking for a way to volunteer in your community, or be part of an emergency preparedness group, this is a good way to do it. It's communication is always critical, especially during disasters, and having a method of communication that provides its own independent infrastructure, that's even better.
Well, there you go. And if you're interested, again, if you are already an amateur radio enthusiast and use it, contact your local weather service office where you live and say, hey, I'd like to volunteer my services. And believe it or not, they will be very responsive and get back with you and say, hey, welcome aboard. And you may never know how much of a life-saving job you'll do when that hits. It's big time. It really is. And so there we go, the amateur ham radio. So, right, Sue?
That's right.
That's where we are, okay? And I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to say goodbye for this era of Twister Talk. We're off into the sunset. Just look us for it on the radio waves of the internet. I'm Gary.
I'm Sue.
And I'm Brandon.
Take care. See you next time.